licensed both in Arizona, USA, and Mexico. She possesses a unique advantage in catering to diverse needs of her clientele across borders. Loretta's journey as real estate expert began 30 years ago. Wow, amazing. When she first acquired her license in Regina. Years, she honed her skills and expanded her knowledge, gaining invaluable experience in various aspects of real estate market. She's been licensed real estate agent in 3 countries since 2016 and just recently put her focus in Arizona and Mexico. Her extensive expertise cover residential and investment properties, allowing her to navigate the complexities of different markets with ease. Being licensed in both Arizona and Mexico, Loretta holds a distinct advantage in serving clients with interest on both sides of the border. She has a deep understanding of the legal and financial intricacies involved in cross-border real estate transactions, making her an invaluable resource for international investors, expatriates, and individuals seeking second homes and vacation properties in Mexico.
Yes, everyone. We're having tacos for lunch, how fitting. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. We are located in Rocky Point, Mexico, which is in Espanol, Puerto Penasco. It's about 4 hours due west of Phoenix. And one of the reasons I was excited to come here is your area is one of our feeder markets. And it breaks my heart every time I work with people from Texas and it's not a referral from an agent. So I want to build that relationship with you guys. As realtors, we're so busy working in our own market that sometimes we, forget to say, are you thinking about buying a second property? Are you thinking about a vacation home? Well, we want to go to Mexico. Where are you looking? One of our easiest ways to increase our income is referrals. So I also brought with me virtually my closing coordinator / attorney that I work with. So I'd like to introduce you to Ricardo Borges. Ricardo, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Good morning. Thank you all. Thank you, Loretta. I wish I was there. This time was not possible, but next, for sure. I'll be happy to talk to you and guide you through the process of buying property in Mexico. So I really hope this is a very productive chat.
First of all, has anyone been to Puerto Penasco or know anything about it? Okay, well, great. We're invite you to come for a visit anytime. This is going to be a more general conversation about buying property in Mexico, so that when you have clients who ask you just have a basic understanding, for your own general real estate knowledge. Okay. So I told you the location of where Rocky Point is. So today we're going to just talk about some of the legal aspects of buying property. So we are located 1 hour from the Lukeville port of entry. And that's in the Mexican state of Sonora. And actually, we are one of the only states where realtors are regulated. They have to be licensed. And I don't know what you guys use for your MLS. What software do you use? Matrix, yeah. Okay. So we use Flex. So we're one of the only states that your clients actually have their own portal too. This is actually,
My, it's a beautiful world. I like swimming in the sea. I like to go out beyond the white breakers, where a man can still be free, or a woman if you are one. I like swimming in the sea. Oh my, it's a beautiful world. I like drinking Irish tea with a little.
the internet's not as strong here, but it's just wanted to give you guys the idea of there's a beautiful beach that's not far away from you. And, you know, lots of people go to Puerto Vallarta. You can buy an oceanfront condo for $300,000. And the great thing about that is, you know, we only have 62,000 people. So it's Arizona's playground, although we are experiencing our biggest increase in customers is from Texas. So for people who like Airbnb, they want to buy something, they can, you know, supplement those payments through their rental income for sure. Okay, so let's get into, we talked about my bio and Ricardo's been in Rocky Point for Ricardo?
18 years now. I'm a local.
Oh, wow. So, unlike the United States, we don't have title companies per se, but what happens on a real estate transaction is they write the offer, everything, same as with the realtor, and then the transaction is closed with what is called a closing coordinator, and that is someone like Ricardo. And he's actually one of the only closing coordinators that's an attorney. And, you know, for Americans and Canadians, when you're buying property in a foreign country, it's a very wise move to have your closing coordinator be an attorney as well. If you have questions, please just shoot them out. So this is just a basic idea of where the subdivisions are. So like I said, tourism and vacation rentals are very strong. Our prices have doubled in the last 4 years, and they're going to continue to grow. We do have an international airport. Right now, we only have flights to Tijuana, but American Airlines has now since added Tijuana as a destination, and we have a direct flight from Tijuana twice a week. Phoenix is just around the corner, as well as Colorado and California. I just sold land to a team of oncologists from Mexico City, so they just broke ground last month for a cancer center. Okay, so the legal considerations to buying property in Mexico. There's lots of myths out there, like the 99-year lease, and is the government taking away my property, and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to just talk about what a bank trust is. Ricardo, I'll defer to you to talk about that.
Okie doke. Can you guys hear me well?
Yep.
Okay. So I'd like to start by explaining what a bank trust is and why primarily we need to put that tool for foreign investment to make it possible to acquire not necessarily ownership of land in Mexico or in the restricted zone, but the benefits or the rights to enjoy property here. So a bank trust, it's an agreement that is pretty much signed by three people. One is called the trustor, who is either the individual or the entity, Mexican individual, Mexican entity. I'll explain why Mexican in a minute, but it's the individual or the entity that transfers ownership to a bank with a specific purpose. So the reason uh, of mentioning that it needs to be a national is because the real estate, the ownership is actually transferred. So only Mexicans within the so-called restricted zone, which is 50 kilometers from the shores and 100 kilometers from the borders, whatever is in there, it's not allowed for any non-national to be acquired directly, acquire direct ownership. So it's a Mexican entity or a Mexican individual transferring ownership to this bank, whatever bank is authorized by the Mexican government to act as a trustee. And the bank becomes, although technically the owner of the real estate, it can only own it for the specific purposes set up in the trust, which is to basically allow the beneficiaries the use and enjoyment of the property without acquiring real rights or ownership. This responds to a need of allowing investment from abroad in Mexico without violating our constitution. Uh, since 1917 or so, the constitution has prohibited any non-national to acquire direct ownership within this so-called restricted zone. So bank trust built that way goes around that prohibition because the non-national is not owning directly the property, and there is a Mexican bank owning it. So we pretty much cover the basis with that. It is a very secure tool as the bank does not consider those assets as part of their own inventory. So whenever the beneficiary wishes to sell, it's easy through a written letter of instructions to the trustee. And the trustee is going to proceed as instructed. So let's say that John Doe is the beneficiary of the condominium here in Rocky Point, and has received an offer. Loretta put together a buyer interested in buying given condominium. So the beneficiary owning currently the benefits of the trust is going to write a written instruction to uh, given trustee or bank to reflect in a public instrument that the beneficiary rights and obligations are going to be assigned to this new buyer. Okay, that transaction needs to happen and be authorized by a Mexican notary public. I'll talk about that in a minute, as Mexican notary publics are sorry, way different from notary publics as you know them in the United States. Um, I don't know, Loretta, if you have more slides.
Yeah, so the next one is what is a FMM and temporary residency? So in
Okay.
order to close on a property,
But before we go that, I thought there were some more slides for our audience there in terms of the bank trust, but it's okay. So before we enter into FMM and temporary residency, I just want to make sure that people understand that a Mexican notary public in Mexico is sort of a branch of the Mexican IRS as they collect taxes. Okay, and they have what we call a public faith, which has been delegated from the state. So basically, what is authorized by notary publics, it's the legal truth, unless otherwise proven, of course. And notary publics are going to produce and reflect judicial acts in a special type of documents and papers with watermarks and a lot of security elements. So the transaction is reflected, and basically that contract is going to go, once authorized by this notary public, to the public registry. And that way, whatever it's been authorized by the notary public is going to be known by the public. Okay. So if this buyer that Loretta brought in was finally reflected as the new beneficiary of that bank trust, that person, his name, her name, its name is going to be public because it's been recorded in the public registry. Kind of something that happens in the States and many other countries. Public registry gives publicity to the judicial acts, contracts that have been authorized by notary publics.
Okay.
So
Yes. Sally's an attorney.
Irish mud.
Right?
Is there a fee to put the property into the bank trust?
Yes, and I'll just review that when we go over the
Okay.
closing costs. But yes, absolutely there is. In order to close, you need FMM, and then you want to move on to temporary residency. So that, they actually brought that into having to have an FMM probably last year, Ricardo. You need to have an FMM to close?
So what is FMM?
I'm sorry, I could barely hear you, Loretta. Can you repeat?
What is a FMM?
Oh, it's a migratory form. It's a permit that the Mexican government, through the immigration offices, issues to people coming in to Mexico legally.
Oh, that makes sense. And so then you would move to temporary residency, which you just use the Mexican consulate in Texas, which you go in increments of 1, 3, 5 years, and then you would move on to permanent residency. So it's much easier to get residency than it is in the United States. Okay.
There is a simple difference between the FMM and the temporary residency. FMM is going to be granted for people that are actually not being residents in Mexico. It's just they're coming in for a day, for a week, for a number of plus days, but they don't have a residency technically in this country. Whereas the residency card allows you to have residency, technically speaking. That means that you have a house or a home in this country, not that you're just visiting.
So one trend that I will notice from the United States, because people now have so much equity in their homes, is a lot of people are choosing to take semi-retirement, early retirement, or especially if one person can work remotely. They're selling their property in Texas and they're living at the beach in Mexico because the cost of living is so much less. So, that could be something that you could put out in your newsletter saying, are you thinking of early retirement? I know, I don't know if you have a title rep here, but they can search, people that are a certain age and have so much equity in their homes. That might be a good person to have a conversation with. How can you buy property in Mexico? Obviously, number one is cash. Number to is seller financing, which we have a lot of. Terms, interest rates, everything is negotiable. So I've been writing offers with 5 to 6% interest rate. Down payment is kind of all over the board, but you're not really going to get anything less than 20%. Usually it's around 30%. And the seller will carry you. The term is also negotiable anywhere from 5 to 20 years. And we have an amortization calculator that's attached to our offer so that the client makes direct payments to the seller. Does anybody have any questions about that?
How
Yes,
many years did you say?
it's totally negotiable. So when I'm working with someone who wants to finance a property in Mexico, first of all, we find out how much money do you have to put down. We get the rental history from the condo or the house so that they know how much they can get in revenue. And then we match that with what they feel comfortable with payments. I mean, hoping that their rental is just gonna be a wash. So it's not a way to get rich as far as the rental property, but it's a way for your clients to acquire property in Mexico for literally, not that much out of the face of the ocean. Obviously, they can refinance their property. We know that the interest rates are kind of an ouch topic right now, but also they're still getting that property in Mexico, which is going to increase in value too. And then the Intercam, which is the bank in Mexico, a couple of years introduced the Dream Loan Program for Americans and Canadians, and it's minimum $250,000 purchase price with 35% down, and they just use 3 years of tax returns. And their interest rates are anywhere from 6.5 to 9.5%, depending on your FICO score. So a lot of people don't know about that either.
Are they using the FICO score that the United States provided?
Yes.
Or is that the-
Yes, and they're using your tax return from the States as well.
What was the bank again?
Intercam, and if you guys if you want to send something out to your clients, I can connect you with the bank. So if your client says, yeah, I'm interested in that program, if you want to say, hey, you can get an actual loan from a bank in Mexico, send that out. When they say we'd like more information, you contact me, we fill out the referral form, and then we book an appointment with the bank, and everything's done through Zoom. Okay. So escrow, we do have secure title Latin America. People are always leery about, I'm putting my earnest money, where the heck is it going? Is it going to Ricardo's office? But the title, right, or mine, I'm on another holiday in Dallas. But it actually goes into an escrow account, and secure title is based in the United States. So your client wires their earnest money right to the United States. It's a domestic wire, it's not an international wire. And the balance of those funds at close is also sent to secure title, and they're the ones who disperse the money, just like in the States. So that usually makes people feel much more comfortable about wiring money. We talked about the bank trust. Earnest money is typically $5,000. Yes.
About the bank trust, if the property is already in a bank trust, and they are wanting to sell it to someone else, does it get to stay within that bank trust?
Well, especially if it's in an LLC, which many Americans have their property in an LLC, your closing costs are much less, and it's a huge advantage to assume that bank trust. You just assume the term. So if it was a 50-year bank trust and they have 25 years left, you just assume those 25 years. At the end of those 25 years, what happens? You just renew the trust.
Now, for those bank trusts in which an LLC is not the beneficiary, is just an individual, you can definitely buy the benefits and you will take over the previous beneficiary of the trust. Of course, and I didn't mention this earlier, the trust is going to have a time frame of 50 50 years, and you have to be very careful as to when you buy out or you buy the position of the beneficiary, because you taking over, that means that you may take over at the 45th year of the trust or the 48th. So it's just a matter of, your closing coordinator helping you, pointing that out. If the trust is about to expire, it is desirable to renew it, at the same time you are buying. But yeah, you just take over the previous beneficiary if it's not an LLC.
So that's one of the contingencies that I write in, is that the closing coordinator will review all of the trust documents and any pertinent documentation related to the transaction, just like anything else. So, yes.
So if there is a Mexican citizen here in the United States buying into an existing property that is on a trust which is dissolved, correct? Or do they have to?
If the person is a Mexican citizen, those restricted federal zone laws do not apply to them because they're a Mexican citizen. So they actually could get, well, you don't want it because you want to own that property as a Mexican citizen. Then you just go straight to getting a deed.
But you can't own it if you're not a Mexican citizen. It goes straight to the bank trust.
Correct.
And it goes for 50 years.
That's a term, yes.
So I've got this property, I've had it now for 50 years, and I don't want to both sell it yet, because I just renew it for another 50 years. But you don't own it, you still don't own it.
You own the beneficiary rights to the property.
So
So
what
and actually, believe it or not, in states like Delaware, they have bank trusts.
So what is the protection for the beneficiary of that trust?
So the bank trust is a legal and binding document with the government, correct, Ricardo? With the state and the bank.
Yeah, it's a title.
And you don't.
It's a legal
have
title.
the whole property that we know, the bundle of rights.
So no, it's not the same. So it's the beneficiary rights. You can paint it, destroy it, whatever, but you still own the beneficiary rights to the property, and no one can take away that property from you as long as you have a trust.
And if you choose to sell it, someone comes in and they're buying the rest of your trust,
Yes,
correct?
Or they can use their own.
Use your own what?
trust.
So that they can set up their own.
You can decide to assume the current trust,
Yeah,
or you can get a new one.
but that current trust goes away, they set up a new one.
Correct.
And, the
It's canceled.
seller gets to determine how much they're gonna sell it for, or just the remainder of the trust.
So the bank trust doesn't have anything to do with the value of the property. It's a contingency of the offer.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay?
Let me just please add that being beneficiary of a bank trust, it doesn't diminish the importance of the title. The beneficiary is the boss. The bank won't move a finger if it's not by a written instruction of the beneficiary. The truster is gone. Once the truster is paid up, it's gone. It's just part of the contract, but it doesn't have any other legal effect by the one of transferring ownership to the bank. So from now on, once the trust has been established, the relationship is basically between the bank and the beneficiary. And again, the bank would be liable, both damages and losses awarded to the plaintiff, if there was something done without the written instructions of the beneficiary. So basically, you being the beneficiary are the boss. So there's really nothing to be worried about that.
Basically, or can own property in Mexico.
Correct. It's a public instrument to convey title.
So how does that get passed down? Like, let's say, for example, I have a property in Mexico, I pass away, what happens to it then?
In your bank trust, you leave instructions, just like a will, when it goes to your property. So when you create your bank trust, those are things that we discuss.
So like if you have a trust here, like if you already have a trust,
No,
in
so
Texas,
the word trust is
Yeah.
totally different than
the
there.
bank trust.
So if you want to leave it to your living trust here,
Yes.
Ricardo, I'm going to let you speak to that because if they have a living trust and they want to leave their property to their heirs that is in a trust, can you word it that leaving it to this living will trust? Or do you actually name the people in that living will trust?
Actually, we always recommend that you appoint whoever you want as your heirs in the Mexican bank trust, because there is a specific clause for that. Okay, it's easier. You can of course report to your government that you have created this bank trust in Mexico. In fact, you should, in terms of taxes. But having that appointment in Mexico within the trust will definitely ease the process of those beneficiaries to be accepted or recognized by the trustee as the beneficiaries. Say in that clause, John and Jay Doe are the primary beneficiaries, and they have appointed Tom Cruise as the substitute beneficiary. And that will only happen after the demise of both of the primary beneficiaries. In fact, the beneficiaries can leave each other as the the right of the surviving spouse or partner. After these primary beneficiaries pass away, then it's a matter for the substitute beneficiary to come to Mexico or to send to Mexico to the trustee proof of the demise, evidently a certificate of death, duly apostilled and translated in Spanish. And that is the main proof for the bank to materialize the hypothesis of the substitute beneficiaries. So as soon as the bank has that evidence, it will send instructions to, again, a Mexican notary public. So the Mexican notary public reflects in this special document that Jane and John Doe are no longer the primary beneficiaries, but Tom Cruise. And that document goes to the public registry again. That's how it works.
Yes.
So if that MN is issued, a permit issued to people coming into Mexico, period. Even if they were planning to purchase property, they have to have it kept in.
So no, because Rocky Point is in the hassle-free zone, which you don't actually need a visa. But if you're gonna stay there for any length of time, and it is a requirement to close, it's a migratory permit.
And
It's 40, when you cross the border, it's $44 per person.
oh, okay, so that happened. All right.
Can you own more than one property in that trust? Or is it one
No.
trust per property?
One house per property.
Technically, the answer is yes. The thing is, it depends on which trustee you're working with and what policies they have on that end. Technically, it is fully possible to own 2, 3, 4, 5 properties within the same trust. But then again, if the trustee is not comfortable with that, they're probably going to ask that you put together a bank trust for each property.
But if you're assuming the trust from the other seller, then it isn't. So what do you need to buy the property? Your earnest money in place, $5,000. A valid passport. Lots of Americans don't have passports and they need to have one to buy property in Mexico.
They need to have one to come back to the US.
Actually, they don't, lots of people go back and forth with their driver's license, but it's a good way to get a passport.
So if you have a passport card, will that works the same way?
Passport card, do you know, Ricardo?
The passport card, although does the same result everywhere you go, you're going to typically be required to present the booklet. The thing is that both banks and notary publics are going to want to see if the signature that you are placing in the bank trust matches the ID. I believe, if I recall correctly, the passport card does not have the signature, only the picture. So you are going to typically be required with that. There are some notaries that are more, unflexible, some others more flexible. Some are going to say, okay, I like the passport card along with another piece of ID like your driver's license or so. But that's one point. Then you have to see if the trustee is going to accept that. Trustees is also, it's a bank. Typically, it's a big bank with, policies. So we have to follow those by the letter.
So it's basically like the title company fears is up to the title company in many occasions, the requirements that they ask for, same thing over there with the trustee, depends on the trustee to be different, or how strict they can get.
Of course. And we all know that relates back to money laundering laws and all that stuff. So
I'm gonna ask recent utility bill, is that for your residence is?
to prove your residency in the United States.
Okay.
And yeah, just something that proves your residency.
So your passport and then here, so you can just make a final decision.
The Texas grid.
I'm going to.
So I have another question. I don't know if this is further your presentation, but there's a perception of high crime in Mexico, and people are afraid to invest there. Can you speak to that for us?
Of course. So I was at a convention in Dallas this week, and I got up and my Apple News break said, 2 people shot in broad daylight. I think it was Tuesday morning. I can tell you that's never happened in Rocky Point ever. I don't even lock my door at home. I feel like it's a very, very safe community. Are there parts of Mexico that are dangerous? Of course, but I mean, there's Chicago, there's whatever.
Dallas.
It's a big country, but where I live, it's very safe. There's lots of seniors there. It's a big expat community. I feel very, very safe there.
How is the weather?
How's what? The weather? So it's usually in the winter about 10 degrees warmer than Phoenix. And in the summer, it's 10 degrees cooler, but we have humidity. So our most humid month is August. You guys understand all about that.
Do you have a breeze?
But we have an ocean breeze. So still lots of people from Arizona still come on the weekends because we have the ocean breeze.
What other countries are the expat community there?
What other countries? Like are globally?
Yes. You said that there are a lot of people from the US, which is from
Canada.
Arizona.
Oh, I see what you mean there.
Other countries.
I mean, primarily it's United States and Canada. Yeah, for sure. So closing costs range from 3 to 4% of your purchase price. All sales are conducted through a notary public. So the contract has Spanish and English on one side, but you don't need to understand Spanish. Standard timing is 45 days for closing. It can be 90 days, depending on how you're taking title. if your client doesn't have a passport, so he has to order one, we can close with what's called a private agreement, which is a legal and binding agreement prepared by an attorney that states all the instructions, and that's attached to the offer, and it sends instructions to the bank that the bank trusts to follow. Ricardo, I know you have lots to say about this, but a few minutes is all I'm giving you.
A few minutes, what?
I'm only giving you a few minutes to talk about private agreements.
Oh, yeah. Private agreements are typically a tool that it's used by real estate agents to facilitate the transaction, as it's definitely faster given that you're not going to have the trustee involved or a notary public involved or anybody else but buyer and seller. So you pretty much allow the transaction to go faster. Sometimes, depending on the circumstances, there's a seller that it's in an urgency to sell, and doing the transaction, formally before in notary public with the bank and everything, it could probably take from, I don't know, 45 to 45 days to, let's say, 3 months, whereas the private agreement could do the transaction in as much as 2 or 3 days, depending on how fast the due diligence is carried out. So it's definitely a tool that helps expedite the transactions. It's always ideal, though, to close with a public instrument, because that document goes immediately to the public registry, whereas the private agreement, it's called private because it doesn't go to the public registry. It stays only within the buyer and the seller. It has pros and cons, but it definitely works in the majority of the cases. So that's another tool to acquire property. At the end, those documents are to be only used as bridge agreement between the moment of the transaction and the money being exchanged and the moment that a notary public produces a public instrument. You always want to have the transaction formalized before a notary public. So your bridge agreement could last 1 month, 2 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. But at the end, you have to have that transaction formalized in a public instrument because you want that to be ultimately recorded in the public registry.
So even though if you proceed with a private agreement, because maybe your client wants to close in 30 days, most people do, the money exchanges hands and the commissions are paid out. So you get your referral as soon as we have the private agreement, because it still is a legal and binding document.
So let's be sure we understand. The private agreement is between the buyer and the seller.
Correct.
It is not filed yet. It's for a specific amount of time.
So the buyer can't go put the utilities in his name or anything like that until it's recorded.
Okay, so at the end of the specified amount of time in the private agreement, then it has to go through the trust and all of the recording.
So let's say she finds a property on the beach she wants. She doesn't have a passport or it's gonna take us 3 months to get the trust. She wants to be there for Thanksgiving. So Ricardo prepares a private agreement between the seller and the buyer. It doesn't say this is over in 30 days. It's however long it takes Ricardo to get the bank trust. And that time frame depends on the bank. There's lots of variables on how long it takes, right?
I'm sorry, you broke up.
No, it's not, because you're not paying. the funds have already transferred, so you already paid her all her own money, you just don't have the trust yet.
But you can take possession of the.
Of course you can, yes. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And just to, there's people that, one another myth is, yeah, I don't own my own property and someone can take my property and I bought something and I don't own it. Yeah, those things do happen. You know why? Most of the time it's because they don't use a realtor and they don't use a closing coordinator. So he does search and gets a certificate of no liens. He does search and make sure that she's the owner and that there's a bank trust in place. And trust me, I've run into situations where a buyer says, yeah, this person wants to sell their property to me, so can you just help me with the paperwork? So, yeah, okay. I look, I go, she doesn't own it. She doesn't own it, it's not in her name. So I call this person that he wants to buy it from, she goes, well, you can trust me because we did it on a handshake, it's a verbal agreement, but I do own it because they said that I do. Well, no.
I'm sure in the world of scamming artists today, that is happening.
Oh,
But big time.
Tell me no.
Yeah,
I
for
don't
sure.
know.
They told me I did it, but you did lie.
And I think there's a lot of things, I know that because that happened to me. I bought my own property there. And, so we are used to the title company, verifying all the liens, right? That doesn't happen in Mexico. The title company is not responsible for that.
The attorney is.
Yes, the attorney, but the attorney only asks the seller, do you owe, and then they get an affidavit that the seller could be lying.
No, that's not true in Sonora, right, Ricardo?
I'm having a lot of trouble hearing. Can you just clarify the question for me?
So can you speak to certificate of no liens? How do you acquire a certificate of no liens?
That it's a document that you file for and request before the public registry. You will provide the registry with information related to a given property. That's actually key element of the due diligence that we have to follow before actually closing on any transaction. And then the public registry searches in their records, and if a given property does have a cloud, it will be reflected in that certificate. And if it doesn't, the certificate is going to say that the property is clear of any clouds. But that is something that, of course, the coordinator it's obliged to do. And of course, if the buyer is leery, he has any sort of doubts, he doesn't know the coordinator, you can always hire your own attorney to pursue and prepare a due diligence prior to getting to the deal, which is ideal. I mean, due diligence is key element of the transaction here in Mexico and anywhere in the world.
Is that federal or changes per state?
Is the certificate of no liens, that process, is it federal or state by state?
It's issued by the state of Sonora. So far, actually, there are a lot of bills in the Congress in order to change that. We will probably have just one federal registry that takes care of every transaction in the country. But at this point, it's just statewide.
And I just,
So typically, would a seller be willing to pay for the title search and then be reimbursed at closing, or?
a certificate of no liens is like $100, isn't it?
No, it is? Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not
Who
expensive.
pays the taxes?
Who pays the taxes? Well, this is why I included this closing thing. So she asked who pays the taxes. So you can
Well,
speak to the
there are
state.
several type of taxes. Capital gains taxes are typically
So,
almost always paid by the seller, because the seller is actually the one having a profit. And I am saying typically and not always, because in some transactions, given the complexity or the facts around that transaction, sometimes the buyer is willing to pay part of it. It's so appealing to the buyer that it's willing to go that route. But typically is paid by the seller, capital gains taxes. Now, there is another tax that it's called transfer tax. That's a statewide tax, and that is assessed by the state of Sonora, and it's going to be typically, again, paid by the buyer. Okay? And also we have the property taxes. Property taxes are paid by the beneficiary of the trust or the owner of the property.
How much is the transfer tax, just out of curiosity?
2%.
2%. It's 2%
Okay.
it's 2% out of the highest between the assessed C value, the commercial appraisal, or the purchase price. Whatever is higher, that's the basis for the 2%.
In Texas, we don't have transfer taxes, they have tax.
So
Lucky
this is the balance of the closing costs. So you'll notice that the second column is they're called the buyer and the seller. And then there's the amounts there. So just note that the purchase price was $315. So you can
Actually,
kind of
item
gauge what-
4, can you put that slide back where item 4 is shown? Right there. Item 4 reflects state taxes. So you have the 2% transfer tax and also the property taxes. Okay, you can either prorate those taxes or give a credit to the seller if that tax has been paid year round.
How much would your taxes be for places?
Taxes.
7,000.
How much?
7,000.
7,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this one was $55.
Well, it's 55, I guess it closed on January 14th.
No, that'll be for the year. And then they prorate it from there. But depending whether it's a condo on the resort.
$55 for a whole year?
Now, we did get in there, and he increased the taxes 10 times, so they might have went up to $500 for the year.
Okay, and if our property taxes were like that, I would have no problem paying a transfer fee.
Right,
Exactly.
Exactly.
I mean, let's be real.
But let me say state tax.
Yeah, I was saying the state tax.
It's a wash,
And you got 13,000 in state tax and transfer fee.
it's a wash.
Loretta, can you go back a little bit to that previous slide? Just want to make sure that you can tell on item number 7, you see that there are no public fees and then the capital gains tax. I like to allocate those taxes in the box of the notary public, because ultimately the notary public is going to pay. The notary public is not only going to calculate the amount of taxes, but it's going to collect them and pay that money directly, representing you. It's important for me to mention, though, that capital gains and any other taxes in this country are assessed in pesos. Okay? And the reason I bring that up is because we have faced a very, very huge problem tax-wise in Puerto Peñasco with sellers that bought property, say, back in 2010, when the exchange rate, peso dollar was 10-1. And now, let's say that they bought property for $500,000, So at that time, 10 times 10, it was 5 million pesos. Now they're selling property for $500,000, and in their minds, there is no profit, and therefore there shouldn't be any capital gains taxes asked. That is not correct, because the Mexican IRS is going to assess the taxes considering pesos. So if you are selling 500,000 now and say that the exchange rate is 20 to 1, so you have 10 million versus 5 million. So technically you have a fiscal profit. There is no profit probably in your pocket, but tax-wise there is. So there are a lot of
Does that make
intricacies
sense?
and complications with taxes, but that's also another reason you have to have someone that is savvy and aware of the world of taxes while conducting real estate transactions.
Do you have any other questions about that? Yes.
Now, in your part, there are certain fees, let's say you're buying like in Jalisco, Mexico, or Monterrey, are there different assessments there,
Do you know that, Ricardo?
different taxes? or
Different states will have different taxes, right?
Say that again.
Different states will have different taxes?
In Mexico?
Yes.
No. Well, the only for the transfer tax. Only for the transfer tax. Sonora is 2%. There may be other entities with a higher amount, 3%. I've never seen anything below 2%.
So do you do any kind of, real estate sales outside of Sonora?
Outside state, no, I do not. So my license is just good for the state of Sonora.
So you're licensed in the state?
Yep, and we have a real estate body called AMPI.
So it's the only state that has an association, so all the rest of Mexico is a grant.
No, AMPI is like NAR in Mexico.
Yeah.
And they have local chapters.
How about in Cancun?
They do have Cancun, AMPI Cancun, they have AMPI Playa, AMPI Tulum.
But in some of those states, they don't have a regulation that realtors need to be licensed, so it could be your taxi driver. But it's just like,
Go back to my first question, Cancun?
Yep.
They have license requirements in Cancun.
Certifications, I think that's what it calls.
just make sure that when you're sending your referral there, and if you need help, call me, that it's a licensed realtor. I mean, if they're dealing with the development, that's different, but even in the state of Sonora, our people that are working at developments are have to be licensed. So, this is I just wanted to end with one of the developments that I represent. It's called Costa Divina. Has anyone heard of Iberdrola before? They are the largest power corporation in the world. And they have a real estate division. They're from Spain. And they have this development. It's a golf course development. It's very beautiful. Golf course on one side, ocean on the other side. Sort of an exclusive boutique feel. Very beautiful. They currently have a 9-hole Jack Nicklaus. The developers around there own the golf course, so they all have a vested interest in making sure that the golf is good. Who likes to golf in here? How much does it cost to golf here?
Oh, the bank is public or private. Could be $150 for a decent one.
Ricardo, how much is it at Isla Del Mar for 18? I think it's $36.
I think it's somewhere around 65.
No, maybe high season, but it's 36 with the cart.
Like a phone.
So you can
Probably
see
in the
this has
twilight.
like lots of living space. Also, as an owner, you get 50% off golf too. It's beautiful.
Are they completely furnished?
They do not. They're one of the only places that don't because they're brand new.
So what are they selling for?
So depending, I have the 1 bedroom start at 320, and then it goes up to, 800,000 depending on the size. That's the biggest one. Anyways, they're super, super nice project for people who love to golf. I think it's beautiful. It's right on the water.
Do you live at Rocky Point?
I do.
Are you from Rocky?
I'm Canadian.
She's from Regina.
Yeah.
How do you know that?
I have relatives in Regina.
You do? Who are they?
The Murphys.
The
Now,
Markets.
Murphy used to be the country with the.
Of course, I know who Cal Murphy is. My husband was the sports writer for the Leader Post, so he knows Cal very, very, very well.
Wow.
Small world.
It's amazing.
It's getting smaller.
Sure is. That's amazing. So that's all I have for you today. I didn't want to take up too much time, but I'm here for questions.
How's business for you there?
Business is booming there because we're a booming little town. My goal for this year is to develop as many relationships with realtors like yourselves to increase our business for sure. Because there's still, I know there's a whole first-time home buyers thing, the interest rates and everything, but that's not those people. That's not the people that are buying there.
So I have one more question. Okay, let's say somebody wants to retire there. How difficult is it for them to get dual citizenship?
You don't need dual citizenship.
As an American, you probably don't want
No,
that.
you don't want it. You just get your residency card, and that enables you to stay there as long as possible. It's
So how
probably,
difficult is it to get your residency card?
it's super easy. It's not like getting residency here or Cassie, I know. You just go to the Mexican consulate, book an appointment. You have to provide them with 12 months of your bank statements to show that you're not going to be a burden on the country, just like any other country asks for that. And that's basically it.
And then how long does that allow you to stay?
The permanent residency is forever.
Okay.
But first, you ask for permanent residency, and they usually give you temporary, so they give you 1 year, then 3, then 5, then you go to permanent. But I know people who've got the permanent right away.
Now, let's say you buy a property there and you want to do, you want to rent it,
Yes.
is that possible?
Absolutely. That's what 99% of people do.
And that's where you have the management companies that also, that's a whole other class.
Yeah, there's property management companies, but with Airbnb now, I have a lot of clients that do it themselves. Because anybody can put stuff on Airbnb, it's the relationships you develop there. If you're in Texas, you don't want to be worrying about clean lady and whatever, all that kind of stuff, they take care of all that stuff, so.
Loretta, could you stay here and then we
Loretta.
take a picture of the entire room?
Yes.
I'd like to add, I believe someone asked about how is the business down here. So I think it's important, and probably it'll respond part of the question. Right now, there are developers developing on one side Encantame Towers with a project of 900 condominiums. That's actually 9 towers. 3 already completed, and the 4th actually it just has started. So developers are really, really in it right now. And there is a brand new project that just broke ground. It's one of the Sonoran groups. It's called Sonora Star. It has 5 buildings. I don't remember how many condos, but say it's around between 500 and 600 condominiums. Las Palomas is also putting together phase 3 with as much as 6 buildings. So town is hot. It's a developer time. It's also the inventory is going to be massive. As there was a moment in time, there was no inventory in town. So business is good. It's thrived, a lot. So not a bad idea to come and see and invest.
If I send you a client, how do we referral? How do you work with referral?
Just like we do, yeah, so we send a referral form. And I was just gonna talk to you guys about that. Do any of you use any kind of lead gen